Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to MythVision and Gnostic Informant. You are going to love this discussion. If you aren't, leave the video. Gnostic Informant, welcome back, man. What's up, dude?
Man, I'm glad to be back here doing making more content. It's been a lot going on this year so far in 2025. A lot more to come. We got documentaries coming out, interviews coming out. Discord is popping now.
Discord, join the Discord. Check out the Facebook groups. Get connected with us. Neil, you're like, how do I describe you, man? I was asked by Alex O'Connor, how do I describe Gnostic Informant? How do I describe Neil? And I was like, damn, no one's ever asked me that question. And the best way I could describe it is he is this hermit-like nerd of ancient Greek and magical sacred rites and deep mystery cult, mythic parallel Frasier type. Just, dude, you are the, like, twin of me, the Didymus of Gnostic, and like we're like one in the same pod, literally. And
I'm like Petrarch reborn,
bro.
And the reason why I said that, I was just reading a biography about Petrarch, and his friends try to get him out of the house to go and, like, hit up the Colosseum. I don't know, whatever was going on in Italy in the 13th century, and he would get all like distraught and physically. You can tell that something was wrong, and they would just give him back the keys to his house and say, all right, go back home and read your books.
That's it.
They're trying to get him away from his books and steal his keys.
That's you, dude.
And I'm like, I am kind of like that.
Almost every messenger group that we're in, you've got a book screenshot coming out, picture, you're showing something of some crazy book we bought, and that's you. So
that's where I'm comfortable. That's where I found purpose in my life, was ancient texts and sources and ancient Christianity, and talking to experts. And
well, that's an important point to our topic today that we're going to be discussing. I imagine we're covering persecution and martyrdom concepts in the early church.
Yeah.
We've been inspired by ideas from Candida Moss, James Tabor, other academics who've noticed stuff about this.
Yeah, I actually talked to Candida Moss on my channel about this very topic. It's a topic that it's one of my big topics that I've been looking into.
Okay. Well, before we do that, again, I commend you because you're trying to learn from all these scholars, but you're also willing to combat when you think something is not correct, or you think primary sources or another scholar might be more accurate. And down the road, you might change your mind, which is what's cool about what you've
just happened to me a few times.
Yeah. So obviously, what the church said about martyrdom and persecution from the origins of Christianity.
What's the tradition like?
Yeah,
Tell us.
Yeah, let's do that. In fact, lay out. Look, you've recently been studying, just this past week, all the exhaustive material you've been.
Well, let me ask you first. When you're going to church growing up as a fundamentalist yourself, what were you taught and what you thought about the early church and Christianity and how it came about?
Well, simply put, obviously God is active. So you already have this idea that everything that's going on, he's part of it. He's in control. But when I thought about persecution, or even really martyrdom, because I didn't even realize that we had this like persecution complex, okay, that is in the church and the Christians have often. But I did know the martyrdom thing, and it worked well for me because my dad was a soldier. So the way my mind worked was, I believed we were sinners. I believed we were guilty of bad things. I was already persuaded as a young teen to convert. And because of the wrongdoings we did, Jesus came and he truly, intentionally went to his death, a noble death, a righteous warrior facing the most cruel kind of punishment on our behalf because of love. And so I had this idea that was just like a selfless love. He's paying the penalty, sacrificing himself for our sins. That was the theology. That was my belief. And I didn't really get lost in early church because we were Protestants.
That's true. A lot of Protestants might not have this idea, but let's just lay this out, because the idea was that the early church fathers were willing to die instead of converting to, or deconverting or whatever.
Right.
Like they were forced to worship Caesar and renounce Christ or die, and they were all dying. And this is like a widely accepted, even some major scholars will say this and not even realize, they were persecuted for 300 years and they took over the Roman Empire.
Right.
You hear this all the time. I recently was watching Wes Huff talking to Joe Rogan about how the Christianity conquered the Roman Empire
from 11 scared disciples.
Yeah, because they were willing to die for something that they knew was true. you had the stories of Ignatius, which is a legitimate source.
We're gonna have to read that, I think. At least parts that I think are
Yeah.
important.
And then you have all these stories about Peter being crucified upside down. You have St. Andrew's cross.
Paul being beheaded with milk coming out of his neck.
Yeah, St. Andrew has the X. It looks like an X cross. And there's different stories. There's conflicting reports. But there's all these different mythologies, I'll call it mythologies, that are assumed to be historical events that are recorded in some sort of history book somewhere.
Right.
And the other part you get, so that's the one aspect, is actual martyrdoms. Tons of stories. I mean, dozens and dozens of these stories of apostles and church fathers being martyred for the first couple centuries of Christianity's existence. That's one aspect that you get in tradition. Then there's another side of another aspect of this where for 300 years of Christianity's existence, Christianity was deemed illegal and it was persecuted heavily by Romans. It was like enemy number one. There's Roman paganism as like one giant religion, and then there's Christianity.
Yeah.
As if there's only it's just two religions. And Judaism too.
Isn't that like a sin that we commit where we constantly are like either or, and there's so much nuance that is being left out. But Westhoff made that point, I think, like you said, on Joe Rogan's podcast, where he says something to this effect that you're describing, where it's like, even gets echoed by Sean McDowell and William Lynn Craig when they're responding to Alex O'Connor, where they're like, contrary to Mormonism, which originated in the burned over district, and we can explain its origins, there's no reason Christianity should have won out when it was fought against and almost destroyed endlessly, which means the Spirit of God and God must sovereignly have been working and looking over them, because there's no way they should have survived and kept the movement alive.
This is another aspect of tradition that it gets accepted without thought.
Exactly.
That somehow this, against all odds, this religion defeated everybody.
Right.
As if everybody was always against it, and there was this duality happening: paganism and then Judeo-Christianity on the other side. The truth is a lot more nuanced, a lot more messier, and a lot different than what people think.
How is it different, Neil? Like, I mean, break down where your brain wants to begin in this.
Yeah.
But like, in what way would you say that it's different? Maybe we're jumping ahead. I don't know. But I mean, the narratives, if we go back to our biblical text, right, you get this depiction, first of all, Jews are the problem.
Yeah.
Which meant a lot of scholars analyze this. And usually what I love about critical scholarship is they don't accept the face value of texts. They always see between the lines and look at the history and anchor it into other stuff and go, hold on. Actually, we think there might have been a rival between Jewish synagogues and early Christian sects. And so now we see there's friction, and then they paint this legend where every time Christians are being accused in the book of Acts or in Luke or whatever, Jews are the enemies that are constantly trying to conspire to have them killed.
Judaizers.
The Judaizers. And next thing you know, every time, what happens? A Roman soldier comes in or a Roman governor comes in and goes, I find no fault with these guys. They're innocent.
Yeah.
So Christians are always innocent. And I know Candida Moss, I hope I'm pronouncing her name properly, she says in her book, the word martyr has the idea of witness, which was an early legal statement, which meant Christians appeared in court and were witnesses in some way, as saying, like, they had to come before a legal situation and address this Caesar versus Christ kind of thing.
Right. And so that's to me, that's where the biggest misconception is about what we call Roman paganism, as if this was like there was one religion with Caesar on top. Caesar was the hierarchy, and then there was, and then everyone worshipped Caesar, and this is how this religion was. In fact, it is true that Caesars were deified. Yeah. And it was true that you were expected to honor Caesar as a deus, as a deity. But most of the emperors did not really take that to this extreme level where it was like, if you don't worship me, I'm going to kill you. There are some recorded that did do this, though. Right. Number one is Caligula. Caligula, you can get this in reading through Philo, where Philo paints a picture of Caligula coming to Alexandria and basically terrorizing the Jews there.
Wow.
Terrorizing them. Saying, worship me as a god. Put up a statue to me right now. I am your God. Your God is lesser than mine. That is in the primary sources. That is true. It's also not really it's not singling out Christians though. It's more of a Jewish thing because we're talking about Caligula. We're talking about before Nero. We're talking about Jesus Christians probably existed, but we don't know to what extent they were an offshoot of Judaism yet. Who knows? But there probably was some persecution there. I'm willing to grant that.
Then there's Nero.
And obviously Nero is going to war against the Jews.
Right.
They have the Jewish revolt at the temple. Christians were obviously a part of that too.
Yeah.
So Judeo-Christians are still kind of together as this, didn't really split off yet.
Got it.
The temple falls. Nero was persecuting the Christians. But here's the thing about that though. There's stories about Nero lighting Christians on fire.
Of course.
Come from sources that come about a century later.
So they're legends or folklore, and they're demonizing the enemy more and, of course, sacralizing, if you will, the Christian perspective. What's ironic is even in John's Apocalypse, you do get this idea that he is a beast.
He's the beast.
He is a bad
He's
dude.
the enemy. Yeah.
Right. And there may even be good reason to interpret the Antichrist early in Paul's letters as potentially Nero or Caligula.
And especially with 666 in Revelation.
And that's the thing, like he sets himself up in the temple.
Guess what else is in Revelation? Nero is the second beast.
Right.
So who's the first beast then?
Right.
When it describes the first beast, the text says he will have the power to rule for 42 months. If you look at Caligula's reign, it's roughly 42 months where he was in power for.
Okay.
And someone might say, wait a minute, I did the math and it's actually 3 years or something. I can't remember exactly how long it was, but there was about a 6-month period where Caligula was actually on the run and wasn't in power anymore. I don't know to the extent of what whoever wrote John's Revelation, knew this, but it is very odd to me that out of all the emperors before Nero, the very closest you're going to get to an emperor that reigned for 42 months is Caligula. Like almost exactly. It might be off by a little bit, but
I don't know
point is, he might have thought that this was how long Caligula reigned for. Also, not only that, Caligula fits the mold of the beast.
Oh, without a doubt, him and Nero, according to
Nero.
So,
but then you have another return of the beast in Revelation, who's sort of alluding to Domitian, who's the last Flavian emperor, who also was recorded to be a very much persecuting of the Judeo-Christians at this time, according to the sources. Some of those sources are from later. So Eusebius has a lot to say about this. That's centuries later.
Yeah.
So we don't know the extent of that. But
or there's Nero Redivivus too, that he comes back.
Domitian is the next coming of Nero.
Okay. I know there were Nero imposters that tried to get the Parthians to come and attack, and they almost succeeded. So there were people who were acting like Nero and almost persuaded the Persians to go and attack Rome because they thought, this is prophetic. One thing I want to mention is the fires in Rome real quick, just to point out.
Blamed it on the Christians.
Blamed it on them. Now, here's the thing.
But that's also from a century later.
True.
From sources from...
I thought Tacitus mentioned this.
Tacitus mentions this,
Okay, so 2nd century.
Yeah.
This is important, though. And
I'm sorry, not a century later, but...
In the next century. I guess
it's a generation later.
At least 50 years, 60 years.
It's close enough to that we should consider it to be true.
Okay.
To an extent, or if not true, to what extent are they co-opting Jewish history?
Right.
And that's what I was going to say, but I cut you off.
No. This is
I was going to say that when we take Caligula, you take Nero and Domitian, and you sort of put together the primary sources and how they're viewed by Christians and Jews.
Yeah.
It almost appears this is my own personal understanding, is that it looks like Judeo-Christians as a whole were persecuted. There was the Jewish War. You also have the Bar Kokhba revolt much later. And so from the late 1st century to the early middle 2nd century, I think it was a rough time to be anywhere between Jewish or Christian.
This is the difference.
No matter how much you want to differentiate the two.
Exactly. I think this is a really good point, especially by the empire standards, right? They're outsiders, so they're looking in, probably seeing kind of a mix mash of the groups. And we know that Christianity appears, as far as we are concerned, by these Galileans in Jerusalem. It's like a central theme in the narrative, whether there's a memory behind it. And if you grant there was, we just don't know exactly what happened. There's a group, and they're involved in Judaism of some kind.
Right.
So this is a good point. Like, it could camouflage in, and knowing who's who, if you're in the empire and you're a Roman or you're an elite, you're probably not the who's who and knowing exactly what's what. The thing about the fire of Rome, Nero gets accused, and think politics today. We kind of have to dabble into that today, so forgive us, but we have to make analogy so people understand. But today, if we were to use an analogy, I don't know what would fit this, but when a candidate is blamed for a war or something going wrong, or a famine or food, or the fires in California that are happening, like, they're blamed for it. Then the shift of blame happens usually onto someone else, and it's usually, or maybe it really isn't the candidate's fault for whatever reason. I'm not getting into today's stuff to say who's right and who's wrong. I don't know enough about it. But as far as the ancient goes, Nero is painted as this guy who literally meant to start the fire so that he himself almost destroyed Rome itself. But then Christians get accused. Now, let's just hypothetically suppose there is a reality to Christians doing this. I know Christians watching this go, they would never do such a thing. They are innocent as a dove, as Christians always are, right? Nothing like Christian love, we always say as skeptics, right?
Yeah.
Well, when you look at the Gospels, Jesus is innocent, right? He is on trial. He's innocent if you're a believer. What the hell are you doing in the Jerusalem temple flipping over money changer tables? Do you honestly think that's innocent?
No.
In reality, if you went into a government
And then you get
building,
special pleading with that one, where it's, well, he's the Son of God.
of course,
Back to the question, totally doesn't matter at all. Like,
what would you do if you're
circular logic?
Neil? You know,
Wait, you just, because like, this is funny. I want to touch on
please
this.
capitalize on it.
You'll hear this thing. Jesus was sinless. His whole life, he never sinned. Well, what about when he turned the money over and he was whipping people? Don't you? If I did that, if I went into a temple and knocked over he goes, that's his father's house. That's his house. Well, what the hell? Now we're begging the question. You're just inserting in the solution to the problem,
right?
Wherever, you know what I'm saying? Like,
imagine it was the Egyptian.
We're just saying what we want now.
What if the story in Josephus said that the Egyptian went into the temple and flipped over the money changer? What about Judas the Galilean? He cleansed the temple.
They would go, well, he sinned.
Of course, they would not accept that.
It's not different for some reason.
Right. So if you grant that he did that, let's just play it happened. Here these guys, Jesus did that, and then he gets killed for it.
Right.
What is the narrative Christians have for Jesus? Innocent? Martyr? Sacrificed? Like, and they've come up with theological.
Or maybe he was a troublemaker and there was some political stuff
Why
going
do you
on.
think they called him a Lestes in the garden, bro? When they came up to they assumed he was. And he goes, why are you coming with swords and clubs? He said,
like a buccaneer.
You could have arrested me in the temple, he said. You could have arrested me there. He is trying to say, I'm not violent.
Right.
But is that the author saying that? Because Jesus himself was literally, supposedly in the narrative, doing violent things in a temple. So what's the truth?
Right.
If we grant that between the lines he really was somewhat of a troublemaker, then there's other ways to look at this. What if Jesus was intentionally trying to go to his death?
That's I was going to bring this up. I was going to get to this point.
I'm following you.
And we can get into that because there was this attitude in the Mediterranean world. I'll give you the prime example, Socrates. He was called the gadfly by Plato and by Xenophon. And there is this concept of a gadfly, which is somebody who, the concept of the gadfly is this. In Prometheus is Bound, Io is a cow. She's a cow goddess. She gets turned into a cow by Zeus. And she has to wander. She's in Prometheus Bound. This is a separate myth. I'm putting two together right here.
Okay.
Just bear me out. But Prometheus is talking to Io, or Io, some pronounce it as Io. I'll say Io. And he tells her that, you have been stung by the gadfly. But basically, Prometheus is the gadfly, and Io is the one who's being stung by the gadfly, and it's her job to go and promote the message. Socrates is given the title of gadfly, somebody who comes along. And by the way, Prometheus, what does Prometheus do in his myth? He's dying for the truth. He's getting
humanity.
He's dying for humanity, like Christ. I'm actually showing images on the screen right now. This is from 450 BCE. These are Etruscan images, and if you notice the look of how they depict Prometheus, very Christ-like. Obviously, Christ came after this,
of course.
So maybe Christ is Promethean-like. I'm just pointing that out there.
Yeah.
You can see he's got his hands up in cruciform, I should say.
Yeah.
He's got his arms up in cruciform style. He's being taken down by Apollo and Heracles. He suffers the fate to save humanity.
Hmm.
And then there's even mythologies about his blood being magic. If you drink his blood, you get eternal life. This is in Apollodorus's talk. Medea is the one who has the
blood,
the cure of Prometheus. So there's
remember.
okay. The reason why I'm pointing this out is Socrates gets called a gadfly before he dies by Xenophon and Plato. So, the concept of a gadfly is somebody who comes to the world and will die for the truth against everything that goes against him.
Yeah.
So Socrates is being persecuted by the religious order of the time, the Eleusinian Hierophants that are controlling the religious atmosphere
He's being falsely
of
accused.
Attica. Right. He's being falsely accused, but he doesn't care. He doesn't try to fight his case.
Right.
He says, I want to die for this truth.
They even give him an option to literally leave permanently, which is called exile.
Yeah.
And he chooses in
this is what's crazy about that.
Yeah.
So Socrates drinks the hemlock and dies. He becomes a martyr. And he becomes immortalized for this. Basically, like they don't really think he's a
Kill
god.
the rooster to
But he's
too.
in some sense immortalized as a figure in history who died for the truth as a gadfly. And the people who are stung by the gadfly are his students. Theophrastus, according to some primary sources, was also condemned for heresy and had to, in some sources, he's either gets killed, he's either stabbed by a sword, or he has to leave Athens. Before Theophrastus, Aristotle, same fate. He gets charged with blasphemy and has to flee Athens. There's all these stories about the Athenian philosophers having friction with the religious order of the day.
Sounds like Jesus.
And they're like martyrs in a sense.
And literally Jesus gets accused by Caiaphas of blasphemy.
Right.
Okay, now I know Christians make much Trinitarian to do with this, but
Well,
it's not.
The Talmud says he was leading Israel astray, leading the youth astray
Right.
by idolatry and all this magic witchcraft.
Right.
So these are real true rumors that were going on about Jesus. The reason why I'm bringing all this up is because there was this atmosphere, there was this attitude that it was honorable to die for something. Christianity didn't invent this.
No.
This was out in the atmosphere.
This goes way, way back. So we should probably blast the past and come back to Jesus and focus on the narration of martyrdom and persecution.
Yeah.
But because this is all unpacking the history behind the concept and ideas that we now see in the church. Iphigenia, Agamemnon's daughter, they're stuck in the port because Agamemnon killed the sacred Artemis deer. She's pissed and is not having it, arrows drawn and saying, hey, what's up? Like, you're not leaving the port. No winds are coming. Agamemnon knows that he must make a serious sacrifice. So he sends for his daughter, but says, listen, Achilles, you're going to marry Achilles. We're going to, make this happen. She comes, he tricks her.
Mm-hmm.
And by notice the trickery. This is an important, when you're looking for myths, I don't give a shit what any of these apologists say. They don't know what they're talking, bro. I'm not kidding. I'm so sick of the nonsense. Do not let them distract you. Look at the scholarship. Go to the primary sources. I'm done with these guys. I'm so past them. They don't even know. I mean, this is going to sound arrogant, but honestly, these guys should get locked on an island and really research comparative mythology, then come back and apologize. So anyway, Iphigenia, you and me both know she at first realizes she's been deceived, panics, but then commits nobly to the death. And it's followed through. Abraham, Isaac doesn't know he's tricked.
In some versions, though, Iphigenia, and this is the reason why I want to bring this up, because it's like the Abraham version.
Yeah.
Iphigenia is told by Agamemnon, you are the sacrifice. And she knows that she's a sacrifice, but she's willing to do it. This must be done.
Mm-hmm.
She takes her up on a mountain, ties her up like Isaac. This is old, by the way, anyone wondering, this is older. This is Homeric.
Right.
This is Iron Age
100%.
stuff. This is before Genesis.
It may have roots into Bronze Age too, potentially.
Exactly. People didn't point that out. Anyways, Iphigenia is tied up on a pyre. He's about to cut her throat with a knife, and then she disappears and is replaced by a deer from Artemis. She is then transported. She's then transported to the temple of Artemis, where she lives as a priestess of Artemis for the rest of her days.
Right.
That's another version of the story. That one is fascinating because you're like, that's Isaac and Abraham.
Exactly. That's the point.
But the point is, she was willing to die
Willing to die,
for divine purpose,
replaced by an animal,
and then
animal sacrifice.
and then given the high honors of being the priest there.
High honor, but also there's trickery involved in the myth, which
she's
is a
deified
theme.
too. She's deified too.
Oh, she's all
deified,
throughout
yeah.
history, like known. This is a sacrifice.
So this is the example of a martyr and what happens to you when you go to your martyrdom willingly. You become deified. You go with God.
So you have Iphigenia, which Socrates is a real world example of this much older narration that we see with Iphigenia. You also have Phrixus and Helle with Athamas, the king Athamas, who goes, I know his new wife, because he had more than one. The next wife hates his children. She tells some people to go and tell the king that the oracles at Delphi said, listen, this drought, it's a famine. Like there's no food. That'll pass if you sacrifice your children. He's a very honorable king, respects the gods, and decides to go sacrifice them on a mountain. And in the process of doing so, one of the gods sends a golden fleeced ram. They fly off on the golden fleeced ram. Helle falls off. And Phrixus, when he gets to Colchis, which was the promised land that later the Argonauts and Jason get to, the promised land, just like Abraham, they sacrifice the golden fleece, and he hangs the ram's golden fleece on a tree, just like there was a ram caught in the thicket with Abraham.
Yeah, you can see this motif floating around in different areas.
It's there.
It's fascinating. The point of all this is this idea of going to your death willingly for some divine cause is floating in the air.
It's there.
And the Christians are sort of in this soup, and they're sort of just a part of that, right? They're part of that cultural milieu of this martyrdom fad.
Yeah.
Like, that's kind of what's going on here.
And would you say that it's closer to, of course, they're all kind of deeply rooted in antiquity, whether or not Christians knew about the particular one with Artemis or were concerned about that, or the particular one of like Phrixus, probably not.
Yeah.
The fact that they are kind of cross-culturally, mythologically tied in, especially back here, would you say that the Jesus one is more likely, in your estimation, closer to the philosophical schools?
Yes. And that's another thing. We look at these early Christian sects and denominations. Some people will call them heretics because they're deemed heretics later by later church fathers. But in the earliest days of Christianity on record, you had these groups called Valentinians. You had the Carpocratians, yeah. And these groups, there's more too. I'm just giving those are two main examples of philosophical. I mean, they're just out in the open telling you that they're following Pythagoras, they're following Plato, they're following Aristotle, they're following the Stoics.
Right.
And they're not making up their own gospels. They're reading John and Paul. They're regular, normal Christians, but they see Christianity as a philosophically informed religion.
Well, we see that in the Gospels that we have that they call canon. We see that. We see Socrates in Acts 17. Paul is the new Socrates in Athens.
Titus cites, what's his name? Where he says that Epimenides, yeah, and which goes back to the Medea myth.
Right. Oh, you pointed that. I didn't even know that.
Cretans are all liars. That's a philosophically informed text, right?
See, I thought it stopped at Epimenides. You taught me it was Medea even earlier when there was a competition between the women. Which one's more beautiful?
Medea is the one that's quoted. Medea is the one that says Cretans are all liars.
Right.
That comes from her mouth first.
Wow.
And then it comes in, and then it gets passed down in different sources. They're all quoting it, and then it gets into Titus.
Sorry, I took it off.
No, it's fine. Titus is citing Medea. The point is, Christianity is a philosophically informed religion early on. Carpocratians, according to the sources, are setting up statues of Plato and Aristotle and Socrates and Pythagoras, and next to Jesus.
So Lucian wasn't wrong when he said Peregrinus, they worshipped him as a god, as the new Socrates, when he said that the groups of Christians bought him as they said he was another lawgiver, just like that sophist. He calls him a sophist who was crucified in Palestine, calling Jesus a sophist.
Absolutely. So this early Christians are definitely informed by the Middle Platonism of the day. Anyone who has realized what Middle Platonism is, it's Platonism. When they didn't call themselves Middle Platonism, they called themselves Platonist. But we can, as looking back now, we can see a differentiation between the early Platonists, but Plato and some of his successors, and the first century BC to around the 3rd century, where there's a where Platonism takes a turn where it starts adopting Stoicism.
Ah.
Heavily Stoicism, also Aristotelian thought.
What does that mean for our audience that they adopted Stoicism or Aristotelian thought? Like, what does that mean for Platonism, and how? I know that this gets lost. There's no way you can unravel this entire.
I don't want to get too off the topic here, but basically Platonism is this idea of ideal forms. You have a it has
ultimate good.
It has the idea of heaven and hell. It has ideas that you find in Christianity, of a soul, one created God who's perfect, who has no flaws. 7 layers of heaven. Yes, that's another thing that Plato talks about. You find in Christianity. You also have God creating what's called the world soul.
Okay.
But the Stoics call this the logos. So this gets John's gospel is definitely informed by either Stoicism or just Middle Platonism in general, which is Middle Platonism.
Which is a mix of it.
Because they have triads are big in Platonism, where you have God being incorporeal, corporal, and spiritual. So there's physical, there's matter, there's metaphysical, and then there's like an intermediary mediator between the two. It's a very Trinitarian-minded philosophical outlook on things.
Might even have proto implications for the later philosophical concepts.
By the way, when the Trinitarians are at the Council of Nicaea, you can read the transcripts today. Arius, Bishop Arius, who's the founder of Arianism, you know what he calls the Trinitarians? He calls them Valentinians. So the Valentinians are these Christians who are saying, in John's gospel, there's a triad. Triados is the Greek word for Trinity. It's the same thing. So anyways, I just wanted to point that out. So philosophically informed, this is where you get this idea of being martyr is a good thing.
Right.
The cults of our world are all worldly, evil. They're not the true religion. The true religion is this philosophically informed Christian following Christ and be willing to die for it. So what happens is you get these stories written about the apostles, about them willing to die and even dying gruesome deaths and staying true to Christ and not falling into, I repent, all right, I worship Caesar, and they die for what they believe in.
So real quick to keep where you're going with this. I do not want us to derail now because we get so deep in the weeds, bro, we forget where we were. This is important because you and I want to know what happened. And we know that we can't know what happened based on our sources. We just can't know. We have to use tools to guess and our best guesses. So there's somewhere between real people are really dying.
Yes.
And how far is that really for?
I'm so glad you brought this up.
Like, this is important, right? Real and then fiction about these ideas.
A lot of these stories are so fanatical and so out there that even the later Middle Ages church, like 9th, 10th century church theologians, like, well, those ones aren't really. Let's push those aside.
Even they can't.
So you get these apocryphal stories written in the sometimes 5th, 6th, 7th. Some of them are 3rd and 4th. You know, the Gospel of Andrew, I think, is late 2nd, something like that. Maybe early 3rd, but they're later. These are later Gospels about what happened to the apostles and how they all met their gruesome deaths. They all do. None of them, there's no exception. They all die gruesome deaths.
Right.
But the problem is these are way later sources, and they seem to not be known by the earlier sources. Paul doesn't mention anything about apostles dying other than Christ, really. We know James, there's conflicting stories about what happens to James.
We know Paul was in prison, but we don't really know. Yeah. In the earliest, we just don't have.
Clement doesn't mention anything, and that's the earliest source we have on the church that talks about Peter and Paul dying. But we don't have this idea of all these apostles dying in gruesome ways until much later. That is a fact. But we do have a primary source outside of Christianity that we can sort of use as an anchor to go off of what happened to not just the apostles. We can put that aside for now. Basically, with the apostles is you have all these legends have written about them that are dated to centuries later, going back and going, well, if Christ died on the cross and Peter died on the cross, they probably all did. So they just kind of write these myths. But then you get Pliny the Younger. And there's an interesting source where Pliny the Younger is writing to Trajan. And this is during a time when, it's right before Bar Kokhba revolt, And so there's probably some Judeo-Christians are probably having some friction at this time, right? But he's just finding out about these people for the first time ever. His uncle, Pliny the Elder, never talks about Christians at all.
He does talk about Dionysus,
but he does. He's even traveling through the Levant and telling us stuff that's happening there. He never mentions Christians at all.
Right.
Pliny the Younger says that he runs into these Christians and he asks Trajan what he should do, and he says, "Hey, Trajan, I brought them to an image of your statue and had them honor the statue, and they did it willingly. They renounced Christ and honored your statue very, very easily." And Trajan was like, "Very good. Let them go. Let them go in peace."
Yeah.
And so, like, that's the first time we hear about what was really. So this is why I wanted to bring this up. The narrative is Christians are dying for what they knew was true. The primary sources say the opposite. The primary sources say Pliny the Younger says that Christians were going, "Well, you're going to kill me if I don't, if I don't say honor. Okay, fine.
Light a candle to Caesar.
Yeah, let's do it right now."
Right.
And they do it.
Right.
So the idea that they're all dying for something that they knew was true, I mean, this is a century after the fact, not even a century, less than a century. It's 80, 90 years later after Christ's death. But you get this is not telling us that Christians are all willingly dying.
Right.
This is telling us the exact opposite. That Christians are going, "Oh, you want me to worship Caesar? Fine. I'll do it as long as I keep my life."
Right.
They're not dying. They're not being martyred.
Again, I'm just trying to paint an analogy. Like, how many Christians, when you were Christian, did you know that were absolutely serious and sincere and on fire to the point where they would have potentially actually put their lives in danger for Jesus? I didn't know many.
No.
I didn't know many, which to me, this isn't
I'm not saying there's not people out there that
no, not at all. I mean, there are people who literally do die.
And David Koresh.
A lot of them we look at and we go,
David Koresh really believed in this thing.
This is why I get in trouble. Like, listen, Ruslan, right? Ruslan does videos almost every time my name gets brought up, MythVision. He always brings up this point about radical evangelicals that are extreme. They were always like not normal. They were always weird or overly nerdy or extreme about Jesus, and they into like really deep weeds of theology and stuff like that, like as if that's a bad thing, right? This is coming from a Christian's voice to denigrate and poison the well of my name and who I am because I was so extreme. And now he's just extreme atheist. He's just extreme skeptic. He's just extreme critic. And I'm thinking to myself, you're just lukewarm. You're just lukewarm, bro. Because if I was Christian today, Ruslan would be the absolute lukewarm, popularized, how do I get attention, make good for my name, and make lots of money.
Yeah.
He is not the kind of Christian that I would look at and go, bro, you're seriously something else when it comes to Jesus. Like, you are the kind of man of God that I would want to be like, who's trying to imitate Christ to the level of martyrdom status. No, dude, you want to be cool with the hip-hop artists of the day. You want to be cool with the Caesars of the day.
Views and
you want to light the candle to Caesar.
Yeah, that ain't...
That's how I feel it.
You're not martyr. You're not a martyr.
This is my point.
Being a martyr.
I can't see him going to Africa or going to Muslim countries and actually teaching and going to risk his life to convert the Muslim world. That's the kind of Christian. Now, that ancient world was probably the same way. Some people really did probably die.
Right.
But for the most part, where's that candle,
not even just dying either. You had sources from... When we get to the 3rd and 4th century, when we get to times where... Actually, I would say even beyond that, 4th and 5th and 6th century, you do start to get a culture of Christians that want to show off how much dedicated they are. You get these Christians that are sitting on pillars for years.
Right.
Well, I think one of them did it for like 22 years. Saint Simon.
Sounds like a Buddhist
Saint
Eastern
Simon
kind of thing.
Yeah, Saint Simon
Ramen.
was sitting on a pillar up on the sky on an old Roman pillar for decades, and people were coming and feeding him every day. And he became a saint because of that. So there is this attitude of dropping out of society. The Desert Fathers down in Egypt, they dropped out of society to go live their own communal lifestyle like the Qumran community did.
Right.
So there is this idea of...
That's a bona fide, sincere...
That's a gadfly move.
Right.
Now, so you can do it. So that's why I want to say there's some nuance here. Was there Christians that are willing to die? Yes. Ignatius is an example. I think from what it looks like, from what the scholarship says, that Ignatius really wrote that letter saying, "Let me die." So there is truth there is if there's anything that I've covered so far, and there's a lot more that I want to get to. If anything I covered so far, it's number one, there was persecution in the first century, but it's not just Christians, it's Jews and Christians together.
Got it.
There's a problematic area, and that's Israel. Number two, there is a level of Christians willing to die for what they believe in. But also at the same time, there's also primary sources that say that not all Christians are doing this. In fact, they're saying, okay, let me live, I'll worship Caesar.
Unlike some of the stuff we get in Josephus, where there's these radical, fanatical Jews that are being persecuted and tortured by, I think, Titus or Vespasian.
Right.
They will not recant. They will not renounce, and they're devoted. Now, they're not Christians.
Right.
Does that make their particular Judaism more true, and then Christians not?
Let me highlight now that we look at that and we think there's this dualism here. There's Judeo-Christianity is one religion by itself, one like group of religions by itself. You know, all the different sects of Judaism, the Sadducees, the Pharisees, and then the Christians, and then there's the Essenes, and they're all sort of a part of this Bibles, reading the Bible and worshiping God.
Right.
Then this paganism as one thing. Like they're all one uniform religion.
Yeah.
That's not the case. There's dozens of cults throughout the Roman Empire. In fact, a lot of those cults get persecuted. Before the Christians, after the Christians, during the Christians. Let's give some examples. The Bacchic cult in Italy was persecuted heavily and outlawed by the Roman Senate in a decree. We still have the plaque to this day. I'm showing on the screen. 186 BCE. Bacchic religion was outlawed. Okay. There's one example.
Can you tell them why?
It was horrifying them. They were, according to Livy,
disruptive.
According to Livy, there was people that were there. Well, first of all, they're not attending to the temples in Rome. They're going out into this countryside with these bacchanalias, and they're paying all their attention over there, and they're giving their money to them, and they're according to Livy, and we don't know. I mean, there might be some fabrication here. They're all having orgies and same-sex stuff going on. That's what Livy says.
Yep.
They're cross-dressing all the while. They're all this crazy stuff that Livy says they're doing. Might be some truth to it. Maybe it's not. Who knows? The point is, they got outlawed.
This is just a comment about Livy. If he's pointing out sexual immorality, how can Livy say that? Livy's not a Christian. He doesn't have morality.
Another amazing point that I wanted to get into
about Roman religion.
This is that was the best question that anyone could have asked, because there's all these Augustan reforms. Livy's living in the Augustan period. There's all these Augustan reforms, and when you look at them, they're influenced by Stoicism, by Platonism, by Aristotelian thought.
By Jesus?
No.
What? No.
That's the thing that I'm trying to get at. Christianity is part of the cultural milieu that is already sort of moving in this direction. There's this misconception that these Roman pagans were all a bunch of orgy-loving, goat-sacrificing, putting blood on their faces and going out having rages.
Yeah.
And Christianity comes along and saves the world from these people.
No more sexual immorality.
But then you look at Livy, and you look at the Augustan reforms, and they're making marriage part of the. Augustine wanted to make marriage the norm,
the nuclear family.
Yeah, he creates this nuclear family. That's Augustus, not Christianity,
right?
And so that's another great. Oh my God, great point again. So, and it's influenced by the same philosophy that Christianity is being influenced by: the Stoics, the Middle Platonists, the Pythagoreans, even the Epicureans. Some of the Epicurean morality gets tossed into the mix. The Stoics taught that you shouldn't worry about tomorrow. You should just live in the now.
Yeah.
What does Jesus say in his parables? Do not worry for the morrow. That is a very
you don't gain a day by doing it. Yeah.
The cynics being okay with not having riches. Store up riches in heaven, not on earth. That is a cynic. That is a cynic ideal number one.
Apollonius did this too.
Yeah, you have the image of Crates, who was one of the first. I should say he's the last cynic, because Crates is a cynic who's taught by Diogenes. Diogenes the cynic.
Laertes.
Yeah, the dog. That's where the word cynic comes from. It means dog. They live like dogs, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, there's an image of Crates dumping out his riches. He doesn't need riches. He just wants riches are are excessive. Well, who's the student of Crates? What do you know? It's Zeno, the first Stoic. Stoicism comes out of cynicism. So what I'm pointing out is morality that we all think Christianity gave us was not from Christianity.
Who is your daddy and what does he do?
So that's another really good point that I wanted to bring up is there is no conquering, there is no defeating the pagans in the battles of philosophy. The philosophy, they all agree on these things.
Right.
You can, if we sat down Origen next to Iamblichus, they agree on a lot of morality issues.
Right.
They disagree on some theology issues.
Justin Martyr, several of the early church fathers voice and echo the same sentiment. They're like, why are y'all giving us a hard time? It's the cults, it's competitive cults.
Yeah.
Why are y'all giving a hard time? Look, we believe like you do all the sons of Zeus and
Yes.
virgins and the Caesars you deify. We believe nothing different. But our guy's good, and those are demonic imitations.
Yeah.
But
And even later churches, even way later, even medieval period Christians are adopting Aristotelianism,
right.
and they're calling it what is it called? Aristotelian Christianity, Thomism. Thomas Aquinas was an Aristotelian, so they have So it's not. This is not
They
like
keep coming back to
it's
Plato, Aristotle, Socrates.
right.
So just to echo more, just evidence of your point about the Dionysian cult being persecuted, even in myth. So remember, we went to Iphigenia, we went to Phrixus and Athamas. We could even go to the myth of Curta and Ugarit, by the way. There's another interesting thing where he's told to sacrifice, but he doesn't. El says, no, I wanted you to sacrifice your son, which is kind of a pre-Abraham thing too. That's older than Abraham by far. But then you go to this idea of Dionysus. When you read in Homer, there's this indication in Homer. Hesiod doesn't give us, it just gives us a genealogy. Homer mentions Lycurgus, and then you get the same thing in Sophocles' play, where Lycurgus is trying to he's trying to go and kill the nymphs on the Mount Nysa and kill the Dionysian cult. And when they do, he gets captured. Dionysus gets him in a cave. He doesn't kill him in this one. He makes him blind and makes him repay, and then he's repentant. Once the king's repentant, he releases him, and he learned his lesson not to mess with the cult.
Yeah.
Because of Theomachoi. Then you go to Euripides. Pentheus F's around and finds out.
They were proud of being this persecuted sect that were on the fringes. They were like the today's left in a way. Like they're sort of like, oh yeah, we're
Poor me.
screw the man, basically.
Yeah.
And then they're like this democratic ideals that you find in the Dionysian religion. Then you have another group called I'm not kidding, they're called the Baptists. They're called baptoi in Greek, Baptist. And they're worshipers of the goddess Codis and Dionysus side by side. And you have plays written by, one of them is a play by Elpulus.
Okay.
Elpulus, and he's making fun of them as these crazy. Basically, he says they're superstitious and weird. The Sabasian cult gets called superstitious. Aristotle says like if they see a certain snake that they have to stop moving until the snake leaves, and then once the snake leaves, they can walk past it. There are certain. The point I'm trying to make is there are certain religious groups or cults that are persecuted and made fun of as being superstitious, not being up to date with the philosophy of the time, not being mature.
Kind of like we might look at Amish and say, why no electricity? Or we look at Mormons and we think something about polygamy.
The point is this, the paganism are not one uniform thing. There's not a religion called paganism. There's different cults, and they're all competing with each other. They're all persecuting each other. There's political divides happening.
Got it.
Christianity and Judaism is just part of that. So they're not singled out as this persecuted sect while everyone else agrees and loves each other. You even have during the Augustan period, when there's the civil war between Antony and Augustus. Antony's out down in Egypt with Cleopatra, and they're bringing to Rome the cult of Isis, the Isis of Osiris, or Isis and Bacchus. And Augustus is the rival of Antony. So for no reason other than him being his rival, he persecutes the cult of Isis and Osiris for the time being, until the death of, and then after, as soon as Augustus passes away, what happens? Tiberius brings the cult of Isis and Osiris back to Rome again.
Right.
So there's times and periods where certain cults get persecuted and then they get back on power again. This is the same thing for Christianity.
That's what I was going to ask you. So now we're back into the Christian era.
Yeah.
This one observation that I want you to run with this.
Put one thing out too real quick. As I pointed out, like there's times when the Bacchic religion is being persecuted. There's times when those bans get lifted, then they get made fun of again. The Sabazians are a bunch of weirdos. They go back and forth, back and forth. It's not just like they're always persecuted.
Got it.
There's times where they are.
Right.
There's times where they're not. Same with the ISIS cult. There's times when ISIS and Osiris was being persecuted. There's times when they were on top.
Right.
And they were the big cult. Christianity, there's times when they're being persecuted, but the first century we already pointed out.
Yep.
They had a rough patch with Nero. They had a rough patch with Domitian.
And they also shared that with Jews.
Right. Yeah. Then you have, the reports of Pliny and all that stuff. Then for the 3rd century, during the Severan period, they're on top, baby. And why do we know this? Julia Mamaea is the empress with the title of Augusta. That's basically
no joke.
deified.
Yeah.
There's only one person alive with that title for both sex, one male, one female. There's always one Augusta, one Augustus. That's it. That's it's basically.
Is that is she almost like Domitilla, where her ascension way earlier? Okay. Because she had an ascension.
Yeah. This is Julia Mamaea. She's a Christian. She's being tutored by Origen.
This is 200s.
Early 200s.
230s-ish, maybe.
She dies in 235.
Okay.
So
this is
she's being taught, she's being tutored by Origen. Her sister is funded. This is how close back to the philosophical thing, right?
Right.
Her sister, Julia Mesa, was the empress before her. She was the patron who funded Flavius Philostratus to write the life of Apollonius of Tyana. Now, if you read the life of Apollonius of Tyana, you can see the morality lines up with Christian morality in so many ways. Very Stoic leaning, very Cynic leaning, very Platonist leaning, all that. Checks all the same boxes of Christianity. There are 2 sisters. One of them is Christian, being tutored by Origen. There are some sources that say that she kept images of Christ and Mary and on her wall that she got from the Carpocratians. So there's another philosophical Christian sect. They're minting coins with Noah's Ark and other Bible scenes on it. And I'm showing
220, 230.
This is over 100 years before.
Your point is that we couldn't find this stuff. Of course, Christians had these beliefs. You're pointing out this is the highest echelon of political power.
They're in power.
They're in power.
Yes.
Okay.
This is 100 years before Constantine.
Got it.
They're not being thrown to lions. Yeah, they're not being lit on fire and thrown to lions like people think.
Let me correct the record to make sure I and our audience understands this, Neil. You're suggesting that like all human history, right now, let's just take post 9/11. How do you think Muslims got treated in America?
Very badly.
Everyone looked at them, and in America, most Americans, let's be honest, looked and thought, do they have a bomb in their purse? Do they have a this and that?
And
how are they going to kill us?
They went through a rough patch.
Right. And then there's moments that they're on top where we look at them and we go, hey, that's my buddy, the Arab, we call Arab gas station, we meet these people, they're our friends. And then there's moments where something happens, a bomber, one extremist screws it for everyone. So I'm wondering if Christians...
That's a good analogy.
I really wonder if in the early empire, one Ignatius, one nut job, so to speak, because if you read Ignatius's letter, he literally, someone's going to say, that was derogatory because he's our saint. Bro, he says he wants to die, and even says so far in chapter 4, let me just read this one part, chapter 4, right? He says in the title, allow me to fall prey to the wild beast. He's calling those who arrested him the wild beast, right? But this is the interesting part for me. I desire to die, chapter 5. The name is, I desire to die, right? He says, may I enjoy the wild beasts that are prepared for me, and I pray that they may be found eager to rush upon me, which also I will entice to devour me speedily and not deal with me as with some whom out of fear they have not touched. But if they do, but if they be unwilling to assail me, that means to kill him, to pounce on him, I will compel them to do so. Pardon me in this. That is death by cop. That is, I want you to make me die. Was Jesus like this?
You brought up a good point about today's world, how the Muslims get treated. But look at like the George Floyd and all these Michael Brown being killed, and cop goes a little too far and kills them, and then the reaction. That's a martyrdom. Right.
He was murdered.
You can look back at Christians and go, they had the same attitude
Why
Nice.
did Paul really die?
And
Christians
just
think
start
it's
these movements happen.
no,
Yeah.
they all okay. Sorry, I'm jumping in there just to make this point. Christian apologists today think all these martyrs happened because they believed the resurrection of Jesus and they wouldn't recant the resurrected Jesus. That's why they died, because Jesus rose from the dead. They act, and then was said by Wes on Joe Rogan as if like people coming back from the dead. That doesn't happen in the ancient world. That's not normal.
Yeah.
Now listen,
Even though we have dozens of sources of people coming back from the dead.
and listen, it isn't a regular occurrence, but to pretend that you have ignored all of the other deifications and ascensions and revivifications of characters, demigods, heroes, gods that died and rise.
Romulus come back from the dead. And they would play even in the time of Jesus, they still would perform plays in Roman theaters of Romulus coming back from the dead.
So this is my point about that, and I hope you see what I'm trying to do here is this. Why they really died is unlikely. Oh, you believe a guy died and rose again from the dead. No one gives a shit about that.
We don't know if they were giving a choice to not die.
Right. Well, the question is what if they were troublemakers? What if they kept gathering public crowds, which is against the law? What if they're flipping over money changers, which is against the law? What if they're antagonistic, like Ignatius literally says, if they won't kill me, I will entice them and make them.
That's what I'm bringing up.
What if they're suicide bombers in the first century, bro?
Exactly. And even like today, like, is there some of these people who die by cops? Did it happen because they're completely innocent? Maybe it's a gray area.
Right.
And that's what I'm saying. Looking back at the past, there's this. I don't know why this is widely accepted. We almost act like they were put on trial and given a choice to recant Jesus, and if you recant your devotion to Jesus, we'll let you live. Right. Where's that trial description? We don't know that.
Right.
We don't know if they were giving no choice at all, and that was it. They were killed. Period. We don't know if they went to their death trying to live,
and we don't know exactly how many would have died. But I can tell you, one trauma. One thing can cause so much legend and idea about this idea of martyrdom that you're getting into.
Yeah, but all right, and that's a great point. But going back to when they're back in power again, right? The 3rd century, as I mentioned, Julian Mamaea, they're not being persecuted at this time period. They're in power. They're fine. Christianity wasn't necessarily legalized to the degree where it was with Constantine. But there's a misconception about this. Judea wasn't part of a senatorial province. So they didn't necessarily, they're part of the imperial province. That means they're part of the lands that are conquered by the senatorial provinces, right? The senatorial provinces is Italy, Greece, North Africa. And I think...
Wouldn't Egypt be?
I think Alexandria might have a part of it that was senatorial. But yeah,
either way,
it's basically like moved in a little bit. But then the outer regions are imperial provinces. Judea is part of the imperial provinces. That doesn't mean that every religion there is illegal. It doesn't mean that Christianity, if you get caught being a Christian, you're going to get arrested. It just means that you're not incorporated into the Roman imperial cult as an official state religion. Constantine made that happen. But during the time before that, they're still treated like everyone else. You had other cults, the cult of Dusharis, which was an Arabian cult, and they even had a temple in Rome. Just like the Christians had their own Christian churches in Rome,
shrines and whole nine.
And there wasn't like Roman
targeting this shit.
Yeah, there wasn't Roman what do you call them?
Like statewide persecution on their side?
What's the word for it? Not policemen, but like from back then, what would you call them? Just Roman soldier.
Okay.
There wasn't Roman soldiers knocking down the doors of churches going, "This is illegal." Right. No, they let them be. There was churches in Rome, there was churches in Corinth, there was churches in Philippi, there was churches in Ephesus, there was churches in Egypt, there was churches in Antioch. These are all Roman cities, Pergamum, and they were fine. They were dwelling like everyone else. The cult of Dusharis is a great example.
That's evident with people in political power that actually believe it, so it's clear.
You have an Arabian religion, Dusharis cult. They're out of the Nabatean world. Mm-hmm. They're worshiping their gods. They're Nabatean gods, but they're also allowed to live in Rome and have a temple in Rome.
Got it.
You have Mithras gets legalized as a Roman religion, but it wasn't for a little bit. Before, it was kind of like Christianity, where it was just this cult of the Cilicians in Asia Minor, where Paul is from, and they're just kind of doing their thing. You also have Elagabalus is called in Syria, the last remnants of the Seleucid Empire in Syria, where their descendants they have a priesthood sitting there from all the way back in the Seleucid period, and they're worshiping this sun god called Elagabalus, and that religion was not legalized necessarily as a Roman state religion until Elagabalus, who had the name, he gets renamed Elagabalus after the god. The point is, you can see other cults operating. They're not legalized religions in the Roman imperial cult, but they're still, Ashman is another example.
Yeah.
People are traveling to the Lebanon and Phoenicia from Italy, going on pilgrimages to visit the Temple of Ashman. It was a famous thing to do up until the 4th century. Christianity is like that, where it's not like this illegal thing that everyone had to hide and do underground.
Right.
This is a normal thing for an imperial province religion. Rome is actually very laissez-faire with their subjects. They let them do whatever they wanted as far as religion goes.
Yeah.
As long as they're not like interfering with our business, you're good.
Right.
Nobody's going to care. Even after the Severan period, someone might go, well, that's the Severan dynasty. That's only maybe one dynasty they liked them. No. Philip the Arab, 260s. So this is still way before Constantine. In the 260s, middle of the 3rd century, he gets baptized to show his solidarity to his Christian subjects. They're still not legalized. They're not being persecuted. They're being treated very nicely. He even, what do they say he did? He's even minting coins with biblical scenes on them. The Noah's Ark was another one that he re-minted. It was the same image that the Severan dynasty used.
Right.
So in the eastern cities, they're minting coins with Noah's Ark on it and other biblical scenes on it. The whole 3rd century, up until Decius, they're fine. Then once again, there's a political shift happens, just like we talked about earlier. A political shift happens, and this happened with the ISIS cult a lot. ISIS cult would be good for a while, then it would start getting persecuted again because they're Egyptians. They're different.
Yeah.
It's you might be able to say it was like racism back then, even though racism is kind of
it's like a hatred toward a particular group.
Yeah, like different Oriental people. Right. Like they're not like
Celsus implies that with this dark magical, like there's like a derogatory magician type stuff.
That's what the word magi becomes, like a slur.
Right.
And Christians get called magi too.
Using Christians,
Christians get called magi too.
Yeah.
But the point is, 3rd century, all the way up until the reign of Decius, Christians are great. They're not being persecuted, not being thrown in lines. They're not illegal. They're just not part of the imperial cult yet. So the idea that they were illegal up until Constantine, and the whole time they were persecuted, is not true. It's not based on the sources. Decius comes around. According to the primary sources, Decius enacted laws that made it harder for Christians to worship. So that is a true thing. Then, after Decius's reign, Diocletian comes in. Now, Diocletian is a legit part in Roman history where Christians were persecuted. This might have been the actual time where there might have been Christians being thrown into lions. Yes.
It was that bad.
Diocletian treated the Christians horribly. But that's the one prime example, and he was in power for a long time. He was in power for like 20 years. So they had a rough patch. But guess who comes in power right after Diocletian? The successor of Diocletian, who reigned with Diocletian actually for a little bit. Constantine. And Constantine flips the narrative on its head. And he doesn't, he not only does he lift the persecutions that Diocletian's laid down, but he legalizes Christianity as part of an official Roman religion. He didn't ban the pagan cults yet.
Right.
He didn't ban Sol Invictus worship. He probably wasn't a devotee himself. But he now makes Christianity legalized, as in now it's getting funding.
Right.
Now it's part of the Roman imperial cult itself. But I would argue that that's not Romans being conquered. That's Christians being adopted.
That's the thing about it. It's
the other way around.
It's like a mutation. So I want to get into just adding your point to a contemporaneous type of example of a cult that we can look to. And I'm actually going to be interviewing a PhD, by the way, who is a believing Mormon.
Yeah.
They're an expert in it. The whole goal, Neil, you're going to empathize with this. Because, dude, we were both Christians, okay?
Yeah.
It's not like I believe Mormonism at all. But I want to have a sympathetic expert who can actually steel man, not coming antagonistic, in support of the eyewitness claims and the early persecution of Mormonism. Because come to find out, guess who else was really persecuted before they did some dirt themselves? And there's a show right now on Netflix that I'm loving. The Mormons. In Missouri, there was an Extinction Act that happened against the Mormons. Now, for the reasons is that they were, like Christians, these odd group of people in early American history, 1820s and 30s. And I'm just...
Joseph Smith was nearly president. He ran for president and nearly won.
He would have been the 11th president of the United States, for people who didn't know this. So Missouri Mormon War. There was a Missouri Mormon War that happened. Governor Lilburn Boggs issued an infamous Missouri extermination order, which declared that Mormons must be exterminated or driven from the state. The Hans Mill Massacre occurred, where a militia attacked and killed 17 Mormon settlers. Get this. Who else was a martyr in Mormonism? Joseph frickin' Smith himself. So now you have a Christ-like figure of the cult being actually persecuted and killed as a martyr, 17 early examples that traumatized the history and sacred lore of the Mormon church. Later on, there's this terrible massacre that takes place way out west in Utah. Guess who's the ones who started it? The Mormons. They blamed it on the natives and acted like the natives were the ones who did it. The Mormons killed almost 200 people, slaughtered them. Now, here's the thing. Just like you're describing,
and then you have
Christianity.
Mitt Romney in power as a senator,
which would have made
Senator Mitt Romney.
Wouldn't that make?
And he almost became the president. He shows you that they're in power once again.
Which wouldn't that make that?
He's like the Julia Mamaea of Mormonism.
Exactly.
And now they're persecuted back from centuries ago, because Julia Mamaea is living in 230s.
Exactly.
That's 130 years before any persecution happened, or after. I mean, so they're long back. They're long after the days of persecution. There's no evidence that Marcus Aurelius persecuted Christians. In fact, some people think Marcus Aurelius liked Christians.
Right.
I don't know how true that is. But then you have Antonius Pius. You have Commodus. There's no sources about Commodus doing anything to Christians. There's no sources about. I think it ends with Hadrian because of the Bar Kokhba revolt. After that, you have a nice smooth sailing up until.
Is it ironic we start getting all this Christian literature too after that?
But it's like you mentioned with Joseph, with Mitt Romney being in power.
Yep.
150 plus years after they were being heavily persecuted.
Right.
That's a good way to look at it, because that's a long time.
And the growth rate of Mormonism and Christianity is almost identical.
When was the so-called slaughter? What year was that? Do you know?
1938. 1838. Sorry,
1838.
So the Missouri.
So Mitt Romney runs for president in 2012. So we're talking almost the same amount of time has passed, between them being heavily persecuted and then being in power, becoming almost nearly the most powerful person in the country. Same thing happened with Christians.
And they had times where they were like treated well and decent, and there were times when they were kind of targeted as odd, and there were times when they were attacked. Right. So there's this like very new.
And this is where you're similar to other cults. Yeah. Once you realize that paganism is not a religion, and we're talking about hundreds, maybe at least dozens of cults that are coexisting. Right. Yeah, 100 at least throughout the Roman Empire. Local cults that all don't get along. They might read divorce. They don't all get along. Some might, exactly.
I mean, look at the Mormons. How do they get along with the Amish? But how do they get along with these people? And FLDS doesn't get along with LDS. Like there's
Just like in Athens, these Eleusinians didn't get along with Socrates. Like this is the Christian. You can't just say that this has only happened to Christians. This is just normal politics of any time period.
Bingo.
So
where's God in all this?
Well,
I'm just kidding. Go ahead.
So that brings us to Constantine now. Now they're not only are they in power like they were with the Severins, now they're part of the Roman imperial cult itself, getting funding. The now Constantine is making the librarians of the libraries church fathers. You get Eusebius.
Do you find it ironic, bouncing to Mormonism? Don't lose track of Constantine and onward, because you've got some good juicy stuff you've learned. Do you find it ironic that the doctrine of polygamy just doesn't fit legally in America. So what do? They scratch doctrines taught by God in their earliest canonical material in Mormonism by Joseph Smith. They start scratching that shit out because it's taboo, and therefore become more American socially and
Yeah.
politically. That way they fit better in.
That's exactly what happened with the church.
Bingo.
In the 4th century, Christianity starts to adopt or become adopted by the Roman ways. They're no longer like these no, I mean, you still have the desert fathers that are kind of dropping out of society, and you still have those movements.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong, but the powers that be, the Eusebiuses, the Epiphaniuses, they are Roman imperial cultists, if you will. They're no different than the Roman imperial cultists before them. I mean, you even have
the language of the cult.
You even have the Vestal virgins being nuns now. Like you even have I can even show it on the screen right now. They even use the same staffs that the old Roman augurs used to carry. Those shepherd crooks and staffs. And in the West, they had this shepherd staff that looks like a spiral. In the East, where the Eleusinian cult was, they used to have this double entwined serpent staff. It was like Caduceus. And this is a source from Robert Straussler's book about Herodotus, where he shows that the ancient priests in Athens carried these staffs that had a caduceus of 2 serpents around. Well, what do you know? The patriarchs in Constantinople still carry those. So they still dress similar. The priests still dress in priestly garbs.
Yeah.
They're just carrying on Roman traditions, but now they're Christians. They're not secretly pagan. I'm not saying they're secretly pagans. I'm saying they're Christians, but they still act like the Roman imperial cult did.
Right.
So okay, Constantine legalizes Christianity, but paganism is still paganism. The cults, the local cults, are still up and running.
Right.
Julian the Apostate comes along, and he tries to revert. He sees
the problem.
He sees the writing on the wall that Christians don't want to play. They don't want to play nice.
Imagine more.
They don't want to coexist.
Right.
The way pagans coexist with each other, even if they have disagreements, they coexist. They don't try to cancel each other out.
They don't want to eliminate all other gods. Like Christianity's idea.
Christianity is designed to be the only thing that it's true,
and that's
and Julian sees this and goes, "No, we need to take." So what he does, he rips them out. He tries to rip them out of power, is where Constantine put them, which he does, and he tries to put like Pythagorean, Neoplatonist teachers back in places of power, teaching the classics, teaching the sources, teaching whatever. And he does this for a temporary time period successfully. And then he gets killed in war against the Persians, against the Sassanid Persians.
And again,
and then as soon as that happens, what happens is within this period of a decade, Theodosius becomes the emperor. I think 15 years later, I think it was.
He's a Christian?
He's a Christian.
But like seriously,
he was like
nuts for Jesus.
He's like a Nazi when it comes to Christianity.
Wow.
He shuts down all the pagan temples. There's no more.
He cancels the pagans.
He basically what he does is so
he shuts down the functionality of the cults.
He reverses the way it was. Instead of the Christians being not illegal yet, but no more legalized, no more funding.
Right.
That's what he does with all the other cults except for Christianity.
So he's pretty much he's starving them with no food and no water.
They have no more funding.
Right.
He shuts down temples. He shuts down certain libraries get shut down under his time. The Olympic Games, done.
No.
Theodosius is the one who canceled the Olympic Games because those are pagan. That's pagan.
Yeah.
You don't need that. Theaters stopped getting funded.
No
more Dionysian plays being performed in cities.
Don't you think just that whole on the Olympic game nights? Don't you think it's horrible today how Christians get so offended about an Olympic Games having pagan things, and they're like again, they're still trying to shut the damn thing down. Like it's like, dude, let the pagans do the practice that they have.
Right.
They need to have all that as theirs as well. Like everything must be mine. Christianity.
Now, but here's the crazy thing about that. So some might go, well, okay. They're just giving back to what they went through for 300 years. Not necessarily, though. It's actually worse than that. Because the cults were so divided, splintered out into their local areas, they didn't have the power to control the narrative, to control the entire religious atmosphere of the entire empire. There was no single cult.
Right.
It wasn't like the Eleusinian Mysteries was in control of the Roman Empire. It wasn't like the
Single political,
the cult of Isis down in Egypt was in control of the Roman Empire. This is the first time Christianity now has, for the first time ever, is in control of everything.
Right.
So it's not the same. And by the way, this is social pressure. Even if someone wants to say, well, they didn't make them illegal, they just stopped the funding. That's like saying, well, I didn't kill you. I just stabbed you with a knife and then you bled out. I didn't kill you.
Right.
Like, and the reason why I'm pointing that out is because, let me back up for a second.
Go ahead.
It's even worse than I'm saying, because Christians made up 10% of the empire. So they weren't, so there was, and this is by the time Constantine came into power.
Okay.
The first century, we're talking 1 to 2% of the empire. There's no reason to legalize them. They're only 1% of the empire. So there wasn't anything sinister being done by the Romans by not incorporating this cult that's 1 to 2% of the empire.
Gotcha.
By the second century, they're like 3-4% of the empire. They're growing incrementally. By the third century, 5% of the empire, right? By the time you get to Constantine in the early 4th century, Edict of Milan, you have the estimates from the scholars, and I'm showing the sources on the screen from the scholars, between 5 to 10%. Some say between 2 to, some people even go to 2% still. I'll grant them 5 to 10% of the empire. By the time Constantine legalizes the religion of Christianity, was only 5 to 10% of the entire Roman Empire.
And when he made it legal, that meant it is a legal religion, not that it's the exclusive,
not that it's the only religion, right? Yeah. So there's other cults that are still operating. Okay, all right, we're all coexist. That's fine.
Got it.
They probably all agreed on that. When you get to Theodosius, which is 70 years later, and this is after the pushback by Julian the Apostate to revert everything.
Got it.
And to make Christianity back to what it was before. Theodosius comes along, and the estimates now that scholars say, so let's look at this now. So 5 to 10% of the empire is Christian. Okay. By Constantine. Constantine converts. Now Constantine is the Caesar, so he's going to be influential. So we got to think he probably influenced people to convert. People probably heard the story about the cross in the sky. It might have been a big deal. I'm granting that this is probably something that happened. I will even double it, just for the sake of argument. Let's double the 5 to 10% to 10 to 20% of the empire. I'm going past what most scholars say.
Yeah.
I've seen different, I was going through different scholars on the estimates. We can't know.
Yeah, we
can't do a census
exactly
of who was Christian and who was not.
Well said.
But we can do we can do science, and we can figure out, and
we can use sociological, anthropological kind of study.
Scholars have done this.
Yes.
I'm appealing to them. I'm showing different ones on the screen right now. Some people still say it's around 10 to 15%. Some people go to 15 to 20%. I've seen even some go up to 40%.
And this is by Constantine.
Right. No, this is by Theodosius.
70 years later.
70 years later after Constantine. So Constantine converts. People probably got
ridiculously more compared to Constantine.
Yeah. So I'm willing to double it. I'm willing to say, let's say there were 25% of the empire. I think the highest I saw from an actual academic was up to 40%. It said like 20 to 40%.
Got it. And this is in around
380.
380. So around 400. Okay.
Yes. So 380 is when the Edict of Thessalonica gets hit, when everything's illegal except for Christianity. Even Christian sects got illegal. The Gnostics.
Yeah.
Even the Mandeans, they were illegal. Everyone's illegal now except for Christianity. Olympic Games, done. Theaters, done. Holy sites of holy pagan sites, done. No more funding. You're done. Christianity is the only religion now. Wait a minute. The majority of people in the Roman Empire are not Christian. Let's use the term pagan for the sake of argument.
Mm-hmm.
Let's do the duality thing that they do.
Yep.
So the majority of the empire is pagan. Up to 40% max is Christian. 25 probably is realistic.
Okay.
So 2/3 to 75% of the empire is not Christian, and they're all illegal. That, I don't care what you say. I don't care how much apologetics you want to throw at me. Say they were very They were nice to the pagans. They didn't slaughter. They didn't kill pagans or send them to the death penalty for being pagans. Okay, maybe you're right. Maybe you're right. Maybe they didn't arrest a bunch of pagans that day. But that's social pressure. So what do I mean by that? Let me give 2 examples because I want to get a little political for a second.
Okay.
Because politics, people get very
This
emotional.
this is political. Yeah.
Think about it like this. Number 1, let's go to the conservatives first.
Okay.
This most of the conservatives are the Christians. I want to talk to them first. Do you remember when COVID hit and a lot of you did not want to get the vaccine? It was against your principles. A lot of you thought it was too quick. We didn't do enough testing on the vaccines. Some of these fears are valid, I think. How do we know these vaccines are going to work? They just came out with them. Where's the studies? And they felt socially pressured to get the vaccine because if you didn't get it, there wasn't no law that said if you don't get a vaccine, we're going to arrest you. That never happened.
But there were people getting fired.
There were companies saying if you don't get the vaccine, you can't work.
Yeah.
There was social events like sports, NFL, NHL. You cannot come into our stadium without a vaccine. Airlines, traveling.
Getting pulled out of planes.
You cannot get in my plane unless you have a vaccine.
And people being pulled off of the planes, not allowed to fly because of these things. Things like that
That is social pressure.
Right. But they're not illegal.
They're not illegal. Right. So you get like people like Tim O'Neill saying, no, they were very, it was all good. There wasn't no persecution against the pagans. What are you talking about?
Right.
No. You're wrong.
Can I give another possible analogy?
I want to give a liberal one too.
Okay.
Do you want to do the liberal?
I was actually going to give in the vein of the idea of why the right, I think, had so much success politically this time without getting lost in all the weeds. But the reason I think they won with that social pressure that you saw that came from people who want to see more progressive ideas thrive, there was some that you could arguably say go so far and push things so beyond the pale. Even people on the left were going, hey, dude, like, you're going overboard with this. What ended up happening is I think it's like the rubber band effect, like, or think of like a something that's pulling, but the tension's so tight that it goes the other way so strong. So when you end up having the situation where there's social pressure, let's say you get this guy who comes in and makes Christianity illegal and they're persecuting, right? He's going out of his way, Julian the Apostate, to enforce almost in any way, shape, or form that he can to reverse the roles of Christianity. The next political person in power that comes in and is trying to stop that extremism that was taking place and reversing things, you're going to get this slingshot where stuff goes even further.
Yeah.
So I think what happened is people started coming that never voted, don't give a shit, but are like actively in the social pressure in there is like, we want our freedoms back. We want this back. Right. We want these ideas back. We want we talked about the home, right? We want these nuclear home, right? We want education system, all this stuff. And then you get Donald Trump come in, boom, everyone's voting now. Like all these people that were in the woodworks are now coming in and voting and participating.
I agree.
I wonder if that played a part in the dynamics of from Julian the Apostate to Theodosius.
That's a great point. That's another way. So I think it's good to look at what's going on now and then sort of like use that to map on what happened back then. Because however you look at it, the fact remains, the majority of the population was not Christian. That means Christianity did not conquer the Roman Empire through philosophical debate.
Right.
They weren't so great and cool and so superior that everyone just said, oh, my dirty pagan orgiastic ways needs to go, and I need to become a great Christian pious. That's not what happened.
Right.
In fact, a lot of these pagans were very pious. They had this very high levels of morality that you would.
That's a myth already perpetrated by Christianity.
And there was no duking it out in the trenches that Christians won and the pagans lost. In fact, by the time if we actually want to talk about who won, when the buzzer ran out, the pagans were still the majority. But they were socially pressured through these edicts. And it's not just the Edict of Thessalonica. All the way into the 7th and 8th century, the Council of Trullo happened in Constantinople in 691 AD. And in that council, we're talking the late 7th, almost early 8th century.
Right. Islam's already on the scene.
Islam's already on the scene. And they're still passing laws on what you can, what pagans can't do and can do. There's still there's a in the Council of Trullo, I'm showing you on the screen right now. There's a canon that says viticulture people who are producing vine people, right? The people working in the grapes and wine industry are not allowed frivolous laughter. Why? Because frivolous laughter would be Dionysian. Tell me that's not social pressure against paganism.
Definitely.
In that same Council of Trullo, it talks about how to deal with heresy Christians, when you find heresy Christians, and what to do with them, how to convert them back, and I guess there was a cult of Cybele or Cybele that was still holding out in Turkey, and what do we do when we arrest them? It basically talks about arresting pagans and how to get them converted and back in society again. No, it doesn't say kill them.
No. It doesn't need to, because this is since Theodosius. So correct me if I'm wrong. Once Christians really get power, not Constantine, post Julian the Apostate, once they get power, they don't let go. And what's interesting about this monotheistic idea and like having a one type of ultimate Christianity is Karakuni's book about the good king. She goes into Akhenaten and she describes what happened and how his short reign, very short reign, but his monotheistic-ish cult and what he did,
No one liked
permanently changed the polytheistic cults of Egypt.
Sure.
From that moment onward, they never were the same. She said that monotheism is the form of monotheism. I know that this is so open to what that even means.
The people hated it too.
I just want to make the point that politically, there's not a better weapon politically, she said, than monotheism. So you want
one God, one king,
one people, one God, one king,
that was
one
point. That's my point about people try to go, oh, but what's the difference between when Christians were illegal and when pagans were illegal? Isn't it the same sort of? No, because when the pagans were in charge, there wasn't one cult running the whole show.
Right.
There was multiple, 100.
All flowers bloom.
All of them are all operating within the Roman imperial system, with Caesar on top, and the augurs and the flaming dialis and the
all Caesar's wanting is respect, though, as one of many.
And that's another myth, is that Caesar always wanted to be worshipped by everybody and force them to. That's only a couple people that did that. They were psychopaths.
Caligula was condemned by the Senate. He got a damn naughty.
The Caesars that did that were heavily criticized
by their own Senate.
Yeah, and that wasn't the norm.
Not even. Yeah.
The point is, when the buzzer ran out, when Theodosius hits that Edict of Thessalonica, the Christians didn't win. They forced it. It's force. Whether they murdered you or not is beside the point. That's why I use the analogy of, I didn't kill you. I just stabbed you with a knife. Right. You're the one that bled out. It's like, think about what you're saying. You stop funding these temples. You make it illegal. You make it so they can't do sacrifice. Sacrifice was illegal. That was a big part of Roman religion.
Yeah. Especially Mithraism too.
And then Justinian in the 6th century, the 500s, he kicks out the philosophers. They get kicked out of Constantinople, the Neoplatonists, and they have to go to Babylon, according to the sources. So they were literally getting kicked out of their places of operation. They shut down the mysteries. They shut down the temples. They shut down they tear down statues of old gods, because those are idols.
Right.
So they force it is a force. It is a social pressure, and they forced it on people.
Now imagine
how they won. Now think about it like this. Think about it like this. Today's world let's put ourselves in the minds of people on the right. People on the right.
Okay.
When somebody socially pressures you to comply, did they win?
Right.
Or did they force it?
They're kind of forcing socially, and a lot of people I hear vocalize. If you listen to the voices of the people that are saying, no, what are you doing trying to make me do this? And I don't want to jab. Right. I don't want to whatever, you know what I mean?
And this is what this is one of these things that I want people to realize. This idea that there was a miracle that the Christians took over the Roman Empire. Well, where's that Christian Roman Empire now? It was taken over by Islam.
Right. I was glad
the Muslims conquer all of North Africa, all the way into Spain, all the way to India on the east, all the way up till Kazakhstan in the north, all the way into Persia, all the way into Turkey. They take over Constantinople. They take over the Church of Antioch. They take over Jerusalem.
Right.
They take over Alexandria. They take over Carthage. They take over Constantinople, Athens. All of the major cities that the Christians took over are now taken over by Islam. Does that make Islam true?
No.
I bet you
not.
any Christian out there going to say
They're not
Islam is true because they conquered Christians.
Nope, and they don't even budge inside, which tells me indoctrination plays a part. Here's what's interesting. It is, but here's what's ironic about what you said. All that you described, all within let's use the dualistic term of pagan and Christian. Pagan and Christians are going back and forth, right? Paganism is an umbrella that has so many different things going on. Many versus the one, right? The one is combating. The one gets political power. And for centuries, they practically maintain that political power while the majority is in the pagan category. They start to diminish those numbers from the pagan category and they start coming over. I would not be shocked if the numbers of Christians increased dramatically in the overall population somehow. And I don't know this. I'm just cutting off the hip fire, just guessing here. When Islam starts to go on its conquest and you have another monotheistic, one religion, one empire, one people, one God combating you, I would not be shocked if people forsook their gods to go into the unified Christian category in some way and say, just like the recent atheist who left Christianity, and she says, oh, it's for spiritual reasons, and I think that the atheists are just a bit naive and not accepting the Christian worldview. Ali Hirsi Ali, something like that, the atheist, the famous atheist, who became Christian. She hates Islam so much because she has her own, I'm not trying to downplay her own persecuted situation where I think they were doing things to females when they're born, little kids, that I can't talk on air, but like she had real world suffered at the hands of Islamists, right? I think that she saw a stronger opponent to Islam in Christianity than she sees in any secular kind of movement right now. So she would rather team up. This is my personal guess.
Yeah.
I'm not saying she didn't have other reasons. She admits that much. Granted, but I think the number one, her hate for Islam caused her to join the group of Christians before she decided to try and flirt with any other secular kind of view or even pagan thoughts. Why aren't you going to Dionysian stuff? Because they're not doing shit against Islam. Go to the Christians, you got the David Woods, you got everyone who's mocking and combating Islam, and they are a real threat to Christianity. So there's some political reasons I think the empire really they started forsaking it.
Right, but here's the point, and now we can end on this too. The idea that Christianity is true because it conquered the Roman Empire, which I think I've already explained that that's not necessarily what happened.
Right.
Especially when you consider the majority of people were still pagan at the time when all these cults got outlawed, basically.
Yes.
Not only that, all of the lands that Christians conquered are now mostly under Muslim control to this day.
Right.
To this very day.
To this day.
So if you're going to say it's divine providence that's causing the hand of God to force Christianity to conquer the world,
or even it's part of it.
Under that same logic, Islam is more true than Christianity.
That's why
Islam has conquered more than Christian has, and they're still doing it at the same rate to this day.
William Lane Craig and Sean McDowell did a response to Alice O'Connor, who's responding to Wes Huff, Inception here, right? In it, they kind of bring up that Wes is like 11 scared disciples conquer the whole world. And it's like, dude, how about this? A guy in Mecca and his small entourage, persecuted, finally gain power in Medina, go back and defeat those in political power in Mecca, end up conquering the world within a century, much more than Christians ever did in a much quicker amount of time.
Small little area in Saudi Arabia where there was no
desert, dude.
They didn't have resources and armies, and that is crazy.
And they ended up incorporating people into their army and helped them defeat. There's so many reasons we can explain it. Right. Christians would hold our hands with that, and they go, yeah, they borrowed from them, and they used this, and they had Syrians, and they had
they turn on their rational hat.
Yep.
When it comes to Islam, they can go, well, I know why they won. They became warriors, and they did this, and they can explain that away.
Right.
But Christianity was an act of God while they conquered the Roman Empire.
That's
no social pressure.
Pleading, bro.
No social pressure. Don't worry about that. And then even at the time of Charlemagne, when Europe starts becoming Christianized,
yep,
you can read the Song of Roland, where they're slaughtering pagans left and right. And now when you get that part in the game, it's no more just making it illegal and social pressure. It's you are a witch. You will be hung, and if witchcraft penalty law, death penalties,
Killing people.
they will light you on fire from being what is called a pagan. So it does develop into the extremes.
It does. And the killing of even other Christian-ish cults, throughout the
heresies, right?
medieval period.
It's almost like it gets progressively worse, not better.
Right.
Until secularists and the Enlightenment thinkers come along. It's kind of fixed the world a little bit.
Would you suggest, all right, so again, AP, apostate prophet, who, to me, I can't put my finger on it, can't read his mind. Like, we used to talk a lot more, but dude, he is literally like the Didymus. Like, you're the Didymus of me. He's the Didymus of David Wood at this point. It's complete full-blown Zionism, and it's full-blown anti-Islamic everything. Right?
Yeah, it goes to the point where it's just too far.
But it's so far that it's like, ignore anything Christian, and his wife converted back from atheism
to how great Christianity is. It's like, well, because of secularists, dude, they live in this. They live in our world now.
Exactly.
They're being socially pressured by us now to be good, to be better. Whereas when they were in power 300-400 years ago,
they're killing
people are being burned at the stake for heresy. Sharia law, forget about Sharia law. Look at medieval law codes.
Right.
That's worse than Sharia law. So
and there's even, I think even natives in America were killed, convert or die kind of stuff as well throughout history. There's so much of this stuff that goes on. And I'm thinking to myself, damn, dude, like, learn the history and nuance this stuff, because you're out here fighting this battle. I get it.
Yeah.
Lots of Muslims in the world need to absolutely try to pacify the religion, try to get rid of the extremists, and many are trying. But it's like people will go, Derek, you really made a lot of Christian claims, but not all Christians like that. I know. And I interview with scholars who are more progressive about these things, much more liberal about these things, that aren't making these kind of legal moves and trying to like suppress us or even shut down women's rights and things like that of what they can do with their own bodies. These things, right? Yeah. You and I are trying.
Paul even says women, if they don't, it's an abomination for women not to have their hair covered in church.
Right.
And you're complaining about Sharia law. Look at your own Bible.
But they can find
AP and those people. Your own Bible has that. Where do you think Islam came from? 600 AD. What do you think was happening? Christianity was in Arabia.
I think
it came out of Christianity.
Bingo. Because
you can't have Islam without Christianity.
100%. Judaism, Christianity literally are the inspiration.
Right.
And when you look at early Islam, Muhammad is looking at Heraclius, I think his name is Heraclius, who's the emperor, who's literally going out and trying to make the end of the world happen. He's apocalyptic.
Fighting the Persians.
Empires fighting. They did it to where they diminished almost all their goods. That gave all the room for Islam.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
So it's all political, man.
To sum it all up, because we talk about a lot here. First of all, persecution as a social norm and culture was big. Morality and martyrdoms.
Yep.
You get in the philosophical circles long before Christianity comes along. Philo himself was a Middle Platonist. Because I consider him a proto-Christian, the way he talks about the Logos and Sophia and all that stuff. That was one of the aspects we covered. So we have this idea that Christian morality conquered pagan morality. No. Christian morality is adopting pagan morality. It's the other way around. Secondly, this idea that all these Christians were willing to die and being martyred. Number one, Pliny the Younger, the first source about this, says the opposite is true.
Yep.
And two, all the so-called apostles' deaths are written in sources centuries after they happened, and they're most likely myths and legend.
Right.
The next thing we covered was Christianity being completely persecuted and fed the lions for 300 years before they conquered the Roman Empire. No, they actually were in power for certain points and treated with
dignity. Or at least accepted.
Treated with dignity, right. Except for a very few emperors.
And even if it would have been like geographically limited locations if there was any of this.
It wasn't like widespread.
Like someone might have liked the Alexandrian Christians and thought, these guys over here in Syria are nut jobs or something.
And last but not least, the idea that they conquered the Roman Empire and everyone converted because of how superior it was is false. It was actually, they made it law and socially pressured people to convert.
Right.
So almost all of this idea that Christianity was this world-saving worldview that came along as superior to everyone else and conquered everything because of how great it was,
Right.
is just false.
I'll say this last thing about modern politics that relates to this with Mormonism. We had Mitt Romney. I don't know much about politics. Definitely something worth studying deeper. So forgive my ignorance or anything that I say that I don't know where I'm at for sure in every way, shape, or form. And that's okay, I think. And if you don't like that, take that shit somewhere else. That's how I feel about it.
Right.
At the end of the day right now is this. Another Mitt Romney type might come in. Because here, think about this. You know how much money the Mormon church has?
A lot.
Billions. What is politics but a game of money, okay? And every time they run, they got to spend so much money to market and do this and that. Imagine another cool Mormon comes in. He's much more chill. He, not super duper religious, but like, that's my background. Come on, guys. And he's just charismatic. He's got Alexander the Prophet personality or a Peregrinus wittiness about him to the point where he captivates American audiences and he becomes the president. And he makes a few little chess moves that end up allowing Mormons to gain a little bit of upper hand, and the religion itself starts to transform. Rather than this weird polytheistic cult in the 1820s from the burned over district, it becomes a very Hollywood-style type thing. They do way better than Scientologists who are weird in the way that they handle things, but really adopt and go with the flow of culture. Next thing you know, they triple and quadruple in size, and America becomes predominantly a Mormon country, not just a typical Protestant type country. What would you say then?
Right.
Are they divine? Is it God? Mormons will say yes. So we're saying turn.
But everyone else will say, no, I can explain that.
I can explain that.
Well, that's what I want you to do. I want you to step out of your own worldview and think if you can explain your own away, like you can explain Islam away or Mormonism away.
Right.
Then what?
I think they're all explainable.
Right.
And that's the reason why I'm a skeptic.
That's the reality.
That's the reality. Ladies and gentlemen, you just heard a gangster bomb drop by Gnostic Informant and MythVision. I mean, look, we could have gone on and gotten into all sorts of other weeds, but you've been digging into this recently. What inspired you to get into this before we go? What made you want to look into this?
If this will probably be out after my documentary. I worked on a documentary for over a year now. Been writing 32,000 word documentary. It's a almost 5-hour video, 4 hours and 44 minutes. And it's probably going to be out when this is released. So I think you can go and check that out right now. Links in the description for that.
Yep.
What is it? That was the research. It's basically showing the religious, and this is sort of that we didn't really touch on this as much. I did touch on it. Roman religion was already shifting towards the Orient and Asia Minor and the Levant and Egypt before Christianity. They were already reaching in that direction, looking for culture. And that's kind of what happened.
The East.
Yeah, they were moving toward, they literally moved the capital to the east, Constantinople. And so there's a lot more going on than people notice. And that's what the documentary points out.
This is what I love about what you do. What we're doing is we're finding if we were to explain history as Jenga, and we have this tower and it's built, okay? And we're like taking block out of block, like trying to figure out how do these blocks build this tower. I don't know why this analogy came to mind, but like there's so many missing blocks, and what we've been taught and how we're told, there's so many blocks missing. How did we get from there to there? Or imagine there's a bunch of blocks on the ground, but someone says at one point there's this tower. What built that? And what you're describing is much more on the ground, the like literal Lego blocks that build history that makes sense. And it doesn't have the magical to explain. It's actually far more nuanced. And like you could even in 1 year, Rome could have done something radically different, shifting toward the East in 1 year that really was pivoting and caused something that 20, 30 years from then ends up swallowing or adopting Christianity and allowing things. I'm just making the point. Like,
right.
It's history is weird, bro.
It is.
Weird.
Exactly.
Thanks so much. I hope you never forget, ladies and gentlemen, we are MythVision, and you have just attained
True gnosis.